predictable, we have an event every Wednesday at 12 noon. And those events will run for about an hour. And you have a Zoom link that you got to this event. That'll be the same Zoom link used for every other event in our series. So we're trying to keep it predictable, keep it simple, to make it easy for you to find the information. If you ever can't be here, because we had to pick a time that worked for lots of people and we talked to a lot of people, but there's some people the time's not going to work for, there might be an event, maybe you get a kid who needs to eat lunch or something. All the events are going to be recorded and archived on Canvas, and we're happy to give you an invitation to our Canvas page for anyone who wants it, and we'll let you archive those, or I'm sorry, access those at your convenience. You have the ability to earn a teaching and learning certificate in professional development, either as a faculty member or a GTA. And we also, if the faculty member, there's an opportunity to be named a TLC fellow. And all the information for that is on our TLC website. So I'll let you check that out at your convenience. You can ask us if you have any questions. Also just started our remote teaching fails video series. At the end of the spring, we had teachers thriving remotely, so people doing really cool things. And we thought, well, sometimes things don't go as planned. So we started a series where we're going to say, the little things that didn't go quite well. So yesterday we led off with Tamara Bauer, a wonderful teacher in the School of Leadership Studies. She was kind of talking about some stuff that she'd been doing. So watch for those. But also, if you have anything kind of going on that is suboptimal or imperfect or ideally hilarious in your remote teaching, let us know, and we would be happy to include you in our video series. We can give you some parameters about shooting that video. We want it to be short, human, and funny to the extent that they can be. So as I mentioned, Melissa, it sounds like your interaction with Kevin and his class was amazing, and we would love to include that in our series if you are willing. So I'm going to ask Tucker to reach out to you with some of those details, and you can let us know if you're interested. But this is our series. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm so honored to be leading off today by talking to you about the teaching persona and talking to you specifically about PEACE, which is an acronym, as you'll find out, during COVID-19. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don Saucier. I'm a professor of psychological sciences. I'm also the faculty associate director for the Teaching and Learning Center. As I mentioned, along with Tucker Jones and Ashley Schiffer, two graduate students who assist me in so many ways. We have an Engage the Stage YouTube channel that I highly recommend you check out because it's awesome. So we are going to begin with a couple of questions. And the first question that I have for all of you, and you all came to this hopefully with some expectations, and if not, hopefully you'll leave with something interesting. What do you want to learn today? So what is one thing you want to learn in this session today? And I'm going to ask that you type this into the chat. So first of all, I'll note that, that Stu Miller, another amazing graduate student that I collaborate with, has dropped the link to that Hamilton parody into the chat for anyone who wants to view it later. You got some people saying they like the remote teaching fails series. That's awesome. So people are wondering about how to be a better teacher, specifically this semester, how to support our students during these challenging times. You want to know what PEACE means, we'll definitely describe that for you. We'll talk about the development of the teaching persona. We'll talk about ways to be engaging in class. We'll learn how to better connect with students. We'll talk about learning about different teaching personas, what this is all about, having some fun, practicing some empathy, how to develop the persona and stay authentic. Authenticity is the middle of PEACE. It's that A in PEACE, so that'll be kind of cool. Helping quiet or reluctant students engage, including in class wearing masks. One of the things we'll talk about, we have a lot more challenges now than maybe we had prior to this pandemic. And I think that those challenges are things that we can pursue and overcome, but it's going to take some intention. So we will talk about those kinds of things. An academic advisor here who wants to learn about strategies that instructors can use in courses, because I do think that this information has to then be disseminated to others. It's not just that we can use it, we can share it with our colleagues, share it with our students to help them do it. And how to walk the balance between flexibility and respondability and being out of control. I think that is an excellent thing. And we're going to see that's going to be one of the first things we talk about in PEACE in just a little bit. So the next question I'm going to ask you, because I like to get my classes and my sessions kind of engaged early on. I want to get you used to using your voice early on. I think the chat is a great way to do this in Zoom. I use this in all of my classes that have a Zoom component, is I like brief responses that get right to the point. So the next thing I'm going to ask you to put in the chat is, sorry, one second, is a single word. And the single word is what you want your students to use to describe you in class. Now, I put in class in quotes because you might not be in a physical classroom. You might be in a virtual classroom like over Zoom. So if someone is going to ask your students about you and that student was able to respond in a single word, what would the student say? And I want you to type that word into the chat. So we got caring, present, resourceful, engaging, lots of engaging, passionate, helpful, real, sincere, responsive. Excellent. What we've done is we've identified what your teaching persona needs to be based on. We've identified the thing that is going to be the signature element of your teaching persona. And I'm going to add in some other features to this that is actually going to take a lot of the answers that you have and put them into one foundation. But we've identified what's important to you. And now what we've got to do, we've got helpful and invested coming in again. Now what we can do is think about how do we get there? Because your teaching persona is how you decide to present yourself to your students. This is intentional. This is by design. It's how you decide to present yourself to your students and how you potentially create that word that you just put into the chat. Now, early on when I was teaching, we weren't taught to teach. We just, the way that my graduate department worked, once you got a master's degree, you could teach. So I got my master's degree, I started teaching, but no one really told me how. So my early goal about walking into class, because I had to figure out who I was going to be in front of that classroom, which is really what your teaching persona is I want to do whatever I'm doing, I want to do it with the confidence of a 4-year-old in a Batman t-shirt. And for reference, these are my kids when they were younger wearing superhero t-shirts. But I just felt I had to come in and command the space. I had to come in and be that superhero in front of the class. And that's what I shot for. And in many ways, I still shoot for that. In many ways, that's a persona that I think embodies a lot about my teaching well, and it embodies a lot about myself as a teacher well. But I started with that. And then I kind of realized that I really didn't have a structure beyond that. So in my early teaching, I just knew that I was anxious. And I'm willing to bet that a lot of us are still anxious walking into class. I'm still anxious walking into class. I'm anxious right now. Anytime I'm teaching or presenting, I'm terrified. And what I do is I try to use that as motivational. And what I did to help manage that anxiety when I was in graduate school, I would walk up and down the stairs in my building while listening to Ants Marching by Dave Matthews. That was my getting ready to teach song. So that was my whole thing. I would come in, I'd have anxiety that I tried to turn to energy, try to turn into being Batman, and that was my whole teaching persona. And it wasn't until later that I figured, we can probably do this with a little better intention. We can probably think through the structure and development of a teaching persona and using that as a foundation for our eventual teaching philosophy. And using that thought and effort, maybe we could actually tell this to people ahead of time when they're training them to be teachers, so they don't just wear out the steps in their building and wear out their Walkman, because we didn't have earbuds and things like that way back when, but wear out my Walkman listening to my cassette tape of Dave Matthews. So what we wanted to start out with is some guiding questions that you can start to use to come up with your teaching persona. And the first question you're going to want to think about is, who do you want to be in class? Who do you want to be to your students and for your students? And you've already started to answer that with that single word. You want to think, what characteristics about your personality do you want to highlight? And you may find that you're going to kind of play up or highlight different characteristics in different classes that you teach, and depending on the size of the class, the level of the class, whether it's first-year students versus graduate students, those kinds of things. And think about the behaviors that are going to help you highlight those characteristics. So what is it that you are going to do to let your students know that you're invested, helpful, resourceful, sincere, real, engaged? What are you going to do to show your students those things? And in reality, how are you going to behave to inspire that single word perception that you've already volunteered? So when we're thinking about the teaching persona and also your philosophy, because your persona and your philosophy have to go together, they have to be a good match. I think the first thing we got to think about is it has to promote student learning and success. A number of you have probably heard me say this before, but if your teaching philosophy is not founded, if it is not essentially grounded in promoting student learning and success, you might want to think about whether or not you should be in the classroom, right? Because if you are not there to help your students learn and help your students to succeed, that is going to be a really, really hard affinity for you. Teaching might not be the thing. It might not be the thing that's going to bring you fulfillment and joy if you're not really basing that entire experience about your students' learning and success. I think your teaching persona and philosophy has to demonstrate you authentically as a teacher. I'm going to talk a lot about my experiences today, but you don't have to be me. You shouldn't be me. You should be yourself. And there'll be things about your philosophy that you'll want to play up and about your persona that you want to play up that I may not do so in mine. I think there are some commonalities, as you'll see, but I think you have to be true to yourself as a teacher. If you are not going to be that seemingly extroverted superhero in front of your class, that's fine. That's completely, totally fine. And trying to be that may not serve you or your students well. Because I think we have to be intentional about the creation of our teaching philosophy. And our teaching philosophy should be dynamic. If something isn't working, we can tweak it. One of the things that I love about teaching is we get so many do-overs, right? Every class is a new class. Every semester is a new semester. Every cohort of students is a new cohort of students. We get so many do-overs. And if something is not working, I highly recommend that you change it. And I know that early on in my career, and even now, I engage in a lot of trial and error to find out what's going to work for me and work for my students. So I'm in a continual kind of data collection mode to see what I'm doing as an expression of myself as a teacher and how that resonates with my students. The teaching philosophy that you have and the teaching persona you have is going to dictate your practices. So this is going to provide a structure that's going to help you make decisions, which is one of the ways I think we should do this by design and not by accident. Your teaching persona and your philosophy is going to dictate the course structure and organization that you have. It's going to dictate how you do course assignments. It's going to dictate how you construct your student learning outcomes in your class. It's even going to dictate the first kind of things that you say to them in their first day. So for me, for instance, and this is giving away a little bit of a punchline, I think engagement is a really important part of my teaching philosophy and my teaching persona. So we talked yesterday in my class about the principles of college teaching, which is teaching people to be teachers, is the goal of the first day is to inspire them to come back for the second day, to make them feel that this is going to be something interesting, valuable, relevant, and worthwhile. Because if you haven't done it in your first day, I think you've missed a real opportunity to set a really cool climate for learning in your class. And this is something that my teaching philosophy comes down to. Now, when I was trying to think about, because the first talk that I ever gave as the faculty associate director of the Teaching and Learning Center was on creating the teaching persona. And I realized that this is something that I didn't necessarily come up with a schematic for how to do. So I thought about how I created my teaching persona and how I could tell this to other people. So the first thing I thought about was my best teachers, right? The teachers that best engaged me. So I thought about what they had in common. And you'll see kind of these things kind of come out in the foundation that I have for teaching personas moving forward. But I looked at my teachers. I have elementary school teachers on this list, high school teachers, teachers in undergraduate, teacher in graduate school. I found the things that were thematic across them. And this is something I'd invite you to do. Think about the best teachers you've ever learned from and what did they have in common. This might be a good start for thinking about your own teaching persona. I didn't end there. I started to collect some data beyond my own introspective experience. I asked students what they wanted in their teachers. And this is a word cloud from 355 general psychology students at K-State. And what do you see pop out? You can write this in the chat. What do you see pop out in this list of things that they want from their teachers? All right, we're getting understanding, caring, kind, treated like a person, being a mentor, funny. All right, I don't see brilliant popping out on that list, very, very high. I definitely see intelligent and smart in there, right? But what we're seeing is the things that are most interesting to our students and important for our students are, as one of you just said, emotional qualities, not intellectual qualities. So it's more that compassion rather than that brilliance that they want in their teachers. And I then asked a different sample of students, how you describe your most favorite and your least favorite teachers? And how are they describing their most favorite teachers in these word clouds? We got fun, we got funny. We also see things like interesting, energetic. Again, we're talking the qualities of the person, of the human, not the characteristics of their intellect. And we can see that one huge word, popping out in the least favorite college teacher, and that's boring. And I've been to a lot of academic conferences, and I've seen a lot of brilliant people present what should be amazing material in a boring, monotone, horrifying way, and I didn't retain any of it. And what I'm getting from these word clouds is that our students want someone who can communicate, someone who's relatable, as someone can just put up in the chat, someone who's enthusiastic. What we can do then is we can create a connection from which to learn. And I said, okay, now I've got the student perspective. Let me ask, Okay, one person said, these clouds make me think that students expect to be entertained. There are positives and negatives to that expectation. I absolutely agree. And we're going to have some data further about what students think about different aspects of the teaching persona that go beyond just these entertainment features. So bear with me for just a second, because I'm not going to say that we should be clowns in front of the class. That's absolutely not what I'm going to be preaching today. So if I lose track of that point, I don't think I will. Please bring that back up, because I have some very, very strong and firm thoughts on that. Beyond students, I asked excellent teachers. So teachers who are award-winning teachers at K-State. These are the answers from 63 people who won big teaching awards at K-State. And now we see a lot of other things come up. We see knowledgeable as the #1 thing. And by the way, when we ask the teacher what the most important thing is, they don't say knowledgeable. It's just that knowledgeable is a word that really, it's hard to come up with other words that are really good synonyms, versus engaging could come across as passionate or enthusiastic or other ways. But knowledge is definitely going to be a foundation of what we're doing as teachers. So it's not just going to be entertainment. We do have to be sharing content that is wonderful. So I said, well, taking all of these data, right, the data from my own introspective experience, the data from what students at least think they want, and the data from award-winning teachers and what they do, and from a couple other pockets of information that I didn't include in this PowerPoint slide, I said, well, I think the foundation that all of us should have for our teaching personas should be peace. And one of the things that I love about the acronym PEACE is that the word itself has meaning. I do think we should be bringing peace to class. I think that we should be a model for peace in the class. I think the safe space that we provide, the escape, I call it the oasis from everything else in life, that when we come to class, right, we can be invested for 50 minutes, for 75 minutes in that material, and that other stuff gets to be delayed, right? Those distractions get to be put aside. Right? Anything your major professor is asking you to do, you know, those timelines about the dissertation, the grant you didn't get, the reviewer who didn't like your stuff, the department head who's dealing with budget issues, all of those things get to stay out when we come into the oasis and bring peace to the classroom. And I think providing that oasis right now, especially for our students, and providing something stable and something normal and something structured and something nurturing is going to be really, really important for our students at any time, but especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. And as I've mentioned, PEACE is an acronym. And I think PEACE is an acronym that provides the foundation for a successful teaching persona that is going to make our experience better, our students' experiences better, and their learning more successful. So we've got this acronym. And the P in PEACE is preparation. We have to be ready. And I think this is the starting point. We have to know our stuff. We have to know what we're going to be doing in that class. We have to have objectives. We have to have structure. I enter every class having an idea about what my students should be taking away when they leave. I created this presentation thinking about the takeaways that you might have. And I think the takeaways that I'm going to hope you're going to have is going to match what you were hoping for the most part. So I think about how it is that I'm going to get to those places. I think about the active learning activities that I'm going to do. I even think about how I'm going to introduce myself. I think about how I'm going to conclude class, the last things I'm going to say. I think all through those kinds of things, and I get something that I'm comfortable with, because this is going to be idiosyncratic to me. The second thing, that first E of PEACE, is I think we need to bring expertise. We have to know our stuff. So while our students did not put brilliant on those word clouds, it's not because I don't think they want us to be brilliant and intelligent. I think it's because they expect that of us, and that is necessary but not sufficient to be in the classroom with them. So these first two elements, preparation and expertise, I think that's our job. And I think if you're a great teacher or a less great teacher, you still have to be prepared and you have to be expert. You have to be knowledgeable with the stuff that you're teaching. So these are the starting points. These are the foundations. These are the things we have to clear. This is the lowest bar, the lowest threshold. We have to be prepared and we have to know what we're talking about. The other three features of PEACE, though, are who we are as people. It's not who we are as intellectuals, it's who we are as people. And the A in PEACE, this middle part of PEACE, as I've already foreshadowed, is authenticity. You have to be you. And this doesn't mean you have to be completely and totally open to your students about every single thing. But I think it means you have to have integrity about what it is you're teaching. You have to believe in what you're teaching your students. You have to believe in what they're asking them to do. You have to believe that what you're doing is worthwhile. It doesn't mean you have to tell them all your thoughts and all your deeper secrets. But I think it does mean that we have to let them know that we are human and let them know that we are going to believe in what we teach them. One of the things I think that is really important at this point is that what we're doing is we can potentially use our own failures and difficulties to teach our information. For those of you who are able to attend Spotlight, it's our annual night of teaching celebration. Happened in March this past year, I think. And if you haven't, Tucker's going to drop in the link. He's going to find the link to the Spotlight event, and you can check them out. But we had 10 presentations where each of those presenters talked about how they use failure to teach and to learn. And I think letting our students know things like, I had trouble with this concept, and this is how I learned it. It imbues a growth mindset, that these skills can be enhanced and improved over time with effort. It lets our students know that we're human. It also allows us to empathize with their learning experience. So I think us being human and letting them know some of the stuff that we're going through. For instance, right now, I'm letting my students know that during the COVID-19 pandemic, things are a little bit different. Because last year when I was giving this presentation, Delaney probably wouldn't have been sitting there on the bed in the guest room right behind me while we were doing this, right? So I'm bringing some of that into this. I'm not bringing it in a way that they question my preparation or my expertise, but letting them know that I'm human, and that being human, you can relate to me. Now, the next part of peace, the C, is caring. I want to be a caring human. I want to be someone who does, as I mentioned, empathize with their experience. I want to put kindness and understanding above academic rigor right now. One of the things that I've added to my syllabi is an empathy addendum. And in the empathy addendum, it basically lets students know that, hey, I know a lot of stuff's going on, and I'm here for you. I'm here to promote your success. I'm invested in your learning. And I tell them these things explicitly. So rather than hope they think that, I tell them that. And I tell them that often. I thank them for coming to class. I thank them for sharing their time with me. I thank them for contributing assignments, because I want them to know that I care about their learning and about their success, because that is fundamentally why I'm in the classroom with them. And then the last letter of peace, the E of peace, is engagement. And engagement, in my opinion, means that we are involved in what we are doing. We are in the moment. We are present and committed to the material that we are sharing with our students on any given day. They are our focus. They are our emphasis. And as we are passionate and enthusiastic and engaged in our material, and this is the foundation for some research we've done, I think this promotes a process I call trickle-down engagement. And trickle-down engagement means that the instructor's engagement trickles down to the student and impacts their engagement, which then trickles down to the student's performance. And we have data to show that as the instructor is perceived by their students to be more engaged, the students themselves are more engaged, and then they do better on a lot of objective measurements of their learning. So one of the things that I think we can do is we can use this entire acronym of peace to provide the foundation for our teaching persona. And then we can adapt it to ourselves. We can decide how it is that we're going to display these things to our students, because I think these have to emit in behavior in our classes. So we came up with this. We thought this was a good idea. This made sense. And then we collected some data on it. So what we did is we asked 140 general psychology students if these were things that were really important for college teachers to do, or characteristics that college teachers should have. And this is research, again, done with my wonderful collaborators, Tucker Jones and Ashley Schiffer. So we defined preparation as being ready to teach class. We defined expertise as being knowledgeable about the content. We defined authenticity as being genuine. We defined caring as caring about the content, about the students, and about teaching the students. And we defined engaged as being interested, energetic, and enthusiastic. So we asked our students 1 to 9, are these important? And this is what we got. And what you see is they said yes, right? Are these important? And they said yes. So on 1 to 9 scales, the averages for these are all above 8. Because students saying, these are good things, I want my teachers to express good things, I agree, I'm going to give really high ratings for that. And that's not surprising at all. They're saying yes to all of these good things. What was more interesting is we said, okay, you got to pick one. If you could have a teacher who only had one of these 5, what would you pick? And they picked caring, followed by engagement, then expertise, then authenticity, then preparation. And one of the things that this is converging with some of the data that we have is that what we should be doing is thinking about more than our content when we teach. We've got to think about the people that we're teaching, and we've got to think about the person that we need to be in order to teach them successfully. We then asked our students, well, in your classes, what percentage of your instructors display these things? And what we see here is, again, they're saying that generally these are happening in their classes, but they're seeing that there's a more typically high standard that they're seeing in their instructors for the preparation and expertise, those things that are necessary but not sufficient for excellent teaching. and they're seeing less of the authenticity, the caring, and engagement. And this suggests to me that these are the areas that we can focus more time on building. I do think most of us are going to be prepared. I do think most of us are going to be at least expert for that class section, meaning we're knowledgeable enough to teach that class session. But the authenticity, the caring, and the engagement, I think, are where we can do some work. Now, you might be wondering, are there things beyond peace? And we wondered about things beyond peace too. So we asked our students, well, what other characteristics not listed in those 5 are important for college students to demonstrate in class? And they gave us lots and lots of words. Interestingly, the vast majority of those words were still peace. There were things that they didn't necessarily see as being part of peace, but that we did. Knowledgeable, I think, is expertise. Helpful, I would put as caring. Passionate, I would put as engaged. And merciful, I'd probably put in caring as well. So there were things that were generally peace that were showing up in there too. There were some other themes that were a little bit harder to characterize, but I still think for individuals fit into peace too. So for some of us, being funny might be a way to show engagement. For unique, that might be authenticity. For creative, that might be prepared. For happy, that might be caring or authentic. For chill, that might be caring or authentic. So I think that really what we've done is we haven't had a completely comprehensive list in this foundation, but we've identified a lot of different characteristics that I feel very comfortable telling you are a great foundation for beginning the creation of your teaching persona and designing yourself for teaching. And when I say designing yourself, authenticity is important. You're not playing a fake role. You're not playing a different character. I think what you're doing is deciding how it is you're going to display yourself. You're not going to be a different person, but you're going to decide how to display yourself in your behavior. Someone said, can we add caring metrics to tenure and promotion documents? And they said, kidding, not kidding. I'm the co-chair of faculty affairs. In Faculty Senate. And one of the things that we were talking about, there's a lot of things that we want people here to do that are not valued in tenure and promotion documents. We talk about things like contributing to diversity and inclusion efforts. We talk about things like community engagement. There are things that we expect people to do, but they're not represented in tenure and promotion documents. So I will add this one to the list. I don't know how we're going to make it objective, but we can add this to the list because I want my teachers, my faculty, my staff, and my students to display peace. So thank you so much for that comment. Now, we have some challenges right now. What I did is I just went into my Facebook feed yesterday and I pulled these pictures off. And a couple of you are either on here or know people who are on here. And one of the first things that we're seeing is masks, right? And you can see by my picture in the upper left, I haven't abandoned completely that superhero persona, right? I still have that as part of my teaching persona. But we're teaching in very different situations. We also see over here that we've got the computer kind of set up. This is actually one of my former graduate students. He's now at Penn State Abington, and he's got 3 screens set up so that he can teach his Zoom classes appropriately and have all that information managed to his students. So this is something I think that is really kind of interesting, that we've got to find a way to manage peace in the COVID-19 pandemic while acknowledging it's creating challenges for us. It's not just about our students, it's about us too. We had collected some data at the end of the spring semester, again with Tucker and with Ashley, and we asked people about their teaching. And what we have over in the left bars, and the left 2 bars are connected by that circle with the 3 asterisks. We asked teachers, how satisfied are you with your typical teaching is the leftmost side, and just to the right of it is their pandemic teaching. And what we found is that they're significantly less satisfied, although they're still pretty satisfied. But these are people who decided to do a survey about teaching. So there's some self-selection bias that could be in there. But we see that they're significantly less satisfied with their teaching during the pandemic than they were before. They basically feel out of their element. They don't feel like they're prepared. They feel like there are things that are just out of their control. They're dealing with a lot of things in their environment that are different. And we know this from some other data we're going to at least allude to in just a second. Interestingly, we asked them if they were satisfied with their T-vals, their teaching evaluations. And I see someone has a comment in the chat about teaching evaluations and changing some of those metrics. Tucker's going to write that down because we can explore that, because TLC runs T-vals. So we can explore that idea about other metrics or other items to use in your T-vals. But the second set of comparisons, and they're grouped by that oval that has the NS standing for non-significant in there, is that interestingly, they were no less satisfied with their teaching evaluations during the pandemic. So psychologically, they're experiencing that it is not as satisfying, they're not as satisfied, they're not as fulfilled, they're not achieving their normal levels. But it's not necessarily showing up in their ratings. They feel pretty good about what it is they did. So we said, well, let's explore their needs, because the needs of faculty, I think, is something that is, needs of instructors, is something I think that is underexplored in the research on scholarship of teaching and learning. So what we did is we used Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I'm willing to bet a lot of you have seen this at some point, right? Maslow's hierarchy of needs says at the bottom, we have things like physiological needs, and we move up to safety needs, and so on and so forth. And what that means is that we cannot proceed to things like self-actualization, which is completely reaching self-fulfillment. We can't reach that if we have biological needs that go unmet, or safety needs that go unmet. So we wondered, is there a hierarchy of teaching needs that potentially needs to be explored and examined to make sure that we as instructors bring ourselves into class, we bring those personas in order for those personas to be effective, do we have to make sure that those levels are being met prior to allowing for self-actualization? So what we did is we wrote a number of items, again, Ashley Tucker and I, to examine a hierarchy of teaching needs. We submitted these to factor analysis, and what we did is we found that we've got 5 levels. Now, the 5 levels don't match exactly onto Maslow's, but that's how data works sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't work right on. But what we found at the bottom, there were things like physical needs. We move up to then things like department belonging, how much you feel like you fit in your department. You then move up to the specific working conditions that you have in your class. Then to the belonging in your class with your students. And then at the highest levels, we had kind of this esteem actualization combination, which is exemplified by agreeing with items like this. I feel like teaching is my purpose in life. So what we have here is we have variability. We have variability across these different levels, and that variability is relating to a lot of the outcomes that people have in their psychological experience of teaching. So for instance, our data analyses are preliminary, but they suggest that these psychological perceptions are related to teaching self-efficacy and dissatisfaction. And which one would you guess appears to be most powerful in predicting lots and lots of teaching outcomes? Things like self-efficacy, things like satisfaction with T-vals, that kind of stuff. If you were to pick one, what would you pick? And you can drop it in the chat. So you got 1 vote for classroom belonging, 1 vote for esteem and actualization, 1 vote for work conditions, another for actualizations. Yes, I'll repeat the question. Of these 5 levels, which level do you think is most highly predictive of things like your teaching self-efficacy, your satisfaction with teaching, and those kinds of things? So which one is most important in creating that psychological experience, do we think? We got some more votes for actualization, some more votes for belonging. What we found, number 1, most of them relate, but the strongest correlations were with esteem and actualization, that highest level. These appear to be most related to teaching self-efficacy, teaching satisfaction, the intrinsic motivation to teach. So, right, so you're teaching because you want to, not because you have to. And probably most interesting to me is it correlated most highly with the pursuit of professional development. So interestingly, the people who are saying they're achieving at that highest level are also the ones who are looking forward to improving that level as much as they can. And I think this is really fascinating. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be exploring these data further and trying to figure out how it is that the teaching needs are fluctuating over the course of a global pandemic, and how it is that we can provide support for these. Because I do think that in order for us to be authentic, for instance, and for us to have a successful teaching persona, we have to be somewhat comfortable in our physical needs, our belonging in our department, our work conditions, and our classroom belonging. I think without those things, it's going to be really hard for us to really be able to immerse ourselves and find fulfillment in our teaching. So what I want to do now, because I've given a lot of information to you, I want to throw out a couple of questions. And these are questions for teaching during COVID-19. So what I'm looking for the first one, and we can drop these in the chat, is what is one way that you will demonstrate peace in your classes? So an actionable step, a behavior that you will emit. What is one way that you will demonstrate peace in your classes? So you're going to let your students know that this is part of your teaching persona. And I'll be quiet while you're writing the chat. All right, so we're gonna get some great ideas in here. So we're seeing modeling active listening skills and acceptance. I love that. Well, one of the things that I think our students often don't know how to do is how to interact or contribute in our classes. So if we provide a model to them and let them know that we're providing that model and provide them with some explicit guidance toward that end, it displays, I think, caring. It also displays some preparation and engagement. So I think that's wonderful. Conducting a survey, and one of the questions gets at what I can do to support them this semester equals caring. I absolutely agree with that. We have to ask them about their experiences, ask them where they are, and we can do this in private ways. We don't have to do this in big open discussions where people have to admit the things that they're struggling with. But I think finding that information is going to help us be more successful in teaching our students. Explicitly tell students that I care about them and their success. I'm a huge fan of this. One of the things that I'd started to do a couple of years ago, we had those huge floods in Manhattan. I know that a number of you were here for that. Some of you weren't, but we had these huge floods in Manhattan, and my basement had so much water in it. And I remember at one point, I was home right before teaching, throwing mud against the side of my house to try to keep more water out of my basement. I get back into class about half an hour later, I still got mud in my shoes and pants, and I went in and I looked up at about 200 general psychology students. And I just said, you know what? Thank you. Thank you for coming today. Things aren't great for me right now. I've got some issues at home. My basement's underwater. I was throwing mud on the side of my house. But for this next 75 minutes, I get to be with you. And I get to teach you about content that I love. And I really appreciate that opportunity. Thank you so much for being here. And they applauded. I didn't expect that. It wasn't what I was going for. I was just telling them genuinely, I really appreciate this experience. And I think telling them we care about them, we appreciate the opportunity they give us to teach, is something that if you authentically believe, which I think many of us do, let your students know that. I think hiding from them how much teaching means from us is missing an opportunity to build rapport and community. Flexibility to respond to each of their situations and needs. Now, someone had mentioned earlier on how we kind of balance the responding along with things like rigor and standards and equity. I think that the flexibility that you have for student situations and needs has to match the objectives of your class and also the logistics that you can embed. I have a class right now of 207 students. I cannot teach that class in 207 different ways. But what I can do is I can build flexibility into that class in terms of assignment deadlines and choices for assignments and other ways that I can try to meet students where they are. So I try to do that proactively. I try to put that in my preparation so that when it gets to the point where students have to reach out to me individually, there are fewer students who need individual accommodations because I've tried to proactively take into account as many things as I can. So I think being flexible is something we can build in ahead of time, and it's going to help out a lot of our students. I think also, like I said, I have that empathy addendum, letting them know, I want to know about a problem before it happens so I can help you rather than after it happens when I have fewer options for helping you. And this is something I say in every class, in every Zoom meeting, in every video sent to my students, that I'm there to promote their success and I want them to reach out to me if they need help. And I would say that this is a similar answer I would give to the resources beyond their needs in class. I love the idea of beginning with questions, as one of you put. It's a great way to get people connected. It's something that I use a lot, something I'm using a lot more in Zoom. I'm using the chat feature as you're seeing here. And I'll use them periodically. It's not just the beginning. I'll use them periodically to make sure I haven't lost people. I love the idea of listening to students' concerns and showing them that you're listening is important, showing them you heard them. I love using personal experiences as examples to show authenticity. I love encouraging students to let me know what the obstacles they're facing. One person says, I hate to talk about themselves in class unless it directly relates to the content, but I'll share more of my personal life. I think anything to humanize is fine. One of the things that I would do in my classes sometimes is going back to the superhero theme that shows up in a lot of my classes is if you could have one superpower and it's not invisibility or flight because those are boring, what would it be and why? And I just chat with some students right before class. And the next time I chat with a couple more students before class. And this is something I think you can start in your Zoom chats before class too. So I don't think we have to divulge our deepest, darkest secrets or our most embarrassing moments. But I think there are some ways we can say, hey, I really like the show. Tell my students right now I'm obsessed with Hamilton. As those of you who see the parody, you'll see not obsessed enough to sing it well, but I'm obsessed with Hamilton. I'll let them know things like that. It just shows that we're people too. And I think we learn better from people than we do from robots. Demonstrate the situation is new for me too. Absolutely agree with that. By the way, my situation authentically now involves a cat, as you may see. So all of our situations are kind of moving on a little bit. Share campus resources. There's a lot of resources that you can embed in this, especially if you have a first year class. There's a lot of places you can get this. There's a student success website that you can embed in your Canvas stuff, let your students know about those. A great way to connect them to resources that maybe we're not expert in. Sharing how it's hard for me. I think that sharing a failure is very authentic. And we're seeing lots and lots of other types of answers in here that are excellent in displaying peace. So thank you so much for contributing those. And I'm gonna steal some of those and making sure that I'm demonstrating peace in my classes going forward. The second question that I'm gonna ask you, because this was more about how we present ourselves to our students, but this relates to that what we call the hot needs data that we kind of come in later, those hierarchy of teaching needs. I think that getting to the level of esteem/authenticity is going to be important. So how do we get there? How is it that we can take care of ourselves? Because I really think that self-care is important all the time, but definitely now. How is it that we're going to do one thing, either for yourselves or for others, that you would recommend to improve our feelings of esteem/actualization as teachers? How do we make this fulfilling? How do we make this something that we're going to find valuable and think that we've got a shot at succeeding at it? So I'm going to ask you to drop in a chat a recommendation to help us improve either ours or others' levels of esteem or actualization as teachers. One person said attend CLC events. I love that one. That was amazing. We're going to keep trying to offer valuable stuff to help you improve your skills. So thank you for that. Find joy in student success. Mentor each other. I think we have one of the things I love about K-State is we have a community of teachers. I've been at 3 different research institutions. You know, my graduate work at the University of Vermont. I was a teaching postdoc basically at the University of Kentucky, and then I've been at Kansas State now, starting my 16th year. More so than in any other university I've been at, there's a real climate of excellence in teaching here. There are a lot of people who like to talk about teaching and really want to excel in it. So I think reaching out and using each other as a community of resources is really helpful for any of the kinds of questions that you may have. And in fact, and I didn't mention this about our TLC series, but if you check out our events, every now and then we have a teaching chat. And a teaching chat just means that it's almost like we have an open hour to come in and talk about whatever you want to talk about. You want to talk about challenges, you want to talk about a project you're thinking about, whatever that wants to be, just sign in and we chat. And these are really easy ways to create those connections and to share ideas. One person talked about all the skills we're learning during the pandemic. I absolutely, agree with this. There was a point during the pandemic where I wasn't sure what a webinar was, and then a week later I had given 4 of them. So I think it's one of those things where as long as we kind of embrace those as opportunities and we use our resources, and there are wonderful resources, the TLC has some, Global Campus definitely has some. We have wonderful instructional designers in each college on campus to help us with this. Use each other to do that and build each other up. Ask for mid-semester feedback from your students. Ask how it's going. Understand this as a process and being kind to ourselves and embracing that growth mindset for ourselves, not just for our students. One of the things I've often seen is teachers that I know and love who tell their students about the growth mindset, that things can be improved with work and with resilience and those kind of things, also make fixed statements about themselves like, I'm bad at leading discussions. You're like, no, it's growth mindset for you as well. Understand this is a process and we can learn and develop. Remind yourself of your successes. We've all had successes in the classroom. Every day I've had a success in the classroom. I've also had something in the classroom virtually every day that I can think of as probably maybe not a success, maybe a bit of a failure. And I try to replicate the success and avoid the failure. So I think that kind of that reflection on how it is that we did can be helpful in improving our teaching. Treat our students and see them as humans, I think is wonderful. If we're looking forward to connecting with our students, it's so much easier to teach and to find fulfillment there. One of the things that I found after I kind of had these moments of embedding peace as a foundation for my own teaching persona is I was going to class earlier and earlier and earlier because I really looked forward to that time with my students. I look forward to building that rapport in our chats before class. I look forward to hearing their ideas, asking about the things they had been up to. And focusing on those positives is really important, creating those positive connections. Reaching out and giving support. Keep technology simple. I absolutely believe that we should stay within our realm of comfort and only expand that discomfort a little bit at a time. So if we do everything new and we can't manage that, it's not going to allow us to support the success of our students. So I absolutely recognize that. I love how one person said, treat ourselves with the same compassion we provide for our students. I found that a lot of us have a hard time doing that. And a couple of people said this is daunting. So this is daunting, and we're going to keep talking about this. I do want to offer some final thoughts before we open it up for general conversation. I think in applying peace to our classes, think about the behaviors that you can emit to show this, demonstrate this explicitly to your students, that you care, that you're authentic, those kinds of things. I like telling my students about the preparation that I've done. So it's not that I just walk in and I've done all these amazing things. Like, hey, I spent a bunch of hours reading the stuff, and then I thought this through, and then I put it into this organization, and then I asked a colleague for help. All of these kind of things to let them know that you shouldn't expect your first draft to be perfect, and you might have to expect to invest some work and some time to creating a quality product. We can model that process as well. Sometimes our students look at us as those brilliant people they could never be. I think it's important that we tell our students the only difference between them and us is a couple of years of education and experience. That's the only difference. We're not inherently more intelligent. We're not inherently more creative. We're definitely not inherently more cool. All that is the difference between us and them is a couple of years of experience and a couple of years of education. That's it. They could be us if they wanted to. And show your students that you're not stereotypically that instructor that is an obstacle to their success. Because some of them see their success as a competition with us, that they're trying to beat us on the exams or beat us on the assignments. Be a collaborator with students. Be someone who supports and facilitates their success, not someone who stands in that way. I think peace is a great foundation for crafting our teaching personas and thinking about who it is we want to be in class. I think peace is not a comprehensive format. There are other things that you could think of to elaborate this and embellish this for your own persona. I think it allows for that personalization. And I think what this will do is optimize your experience as a teacher, which then will optimize your students' experience, which will then optimize your learning. And I think we should take care of and be kind to ourselves throughout this process. And all I've been saying is give peace a chance. And if you have any questions, want a copy of this presentation, my email is right there. Tucker, if you drop that in the chat real quick, that'd be amazing as well. If you want to read some of our thoughts about this, there's a couple of articles that are links here. If we send you the PowerPoint, you'll be able to check those out where we talked about peace. The first article was written last September before the pandemic. The second was written during the pandemic about some ideas about how peace as our teaching persona can be helpful for our students. I'm going to open it up for general conversation now. I'm going to go back to the big Brady Bunch mode. I'm going to start my screen share. The last thing I'm going to point out before I do that, however, is please submit a post-event survey to let us know what you thought about this seminar today. So I'm now back in Brady Bunch mode, and I want to open it up for general conversation, questions, thoughts, or comments. And Tucker has now dropped the final survey into the chat as well. Oh, one of the questions someone asked is, what is next week's topic? Next week's topic is keeping a teaching journal from Global Campus's Katie Linder, and kind of keeping track of those successes and failures and how we can learn from those. All of our events for the fall semester, I think with one exception, which is still being finalized, are listed on our webpage. We'll also be promoting those events with promotional videos. Each Thursday, we'll put out the promotional videos for the next week's event. If you caught our newsletter, which comes out every other week on Tuesday, if you click in that, it has all of our events that we've scheduled as well. So what questions or comments that all y'all have? And you can drop it in the chat, or you can use your actual voice, whatever you're comfortable with. And someone dropped some kind words privately to me. Thank you so much. It's very meaningful for people to find these helpful. So given that no one's asking questions, one of the things that I do when I ask a question and no one answers is I ask a different question. And the question that I'm going to ask then is, what is the biggest concern that you have about bringing peace to your classroom?
I'll say maintaining that mindset when things are going horribly wrong. So yesterday I taught my first high flex class and planned an activity where they did use the discussion board to chat with students in person and online. And it didn't go great, but I asked, I told students, and I'm teaching a class on language pedagogy, so it's teaching about teaching. And so I used it as an example, and I said, hey guys, sometimes things aren't going to go great, like right now. I'm not sure if I'm going to do this again. I might tweak it and try it another time, and then I'll decide whether it's worth continuing with this or not. But it can be kind of hard when things are going really poorly to keep your head.
I think modeling how we can grow from our own experiences is great, especially when we're teaching about teaching. I think, and you can empathize with this, and Tucker can empathize with this. When we're teaching about teaching, when we're telling other people how to be good teachers, the pressure to be a good teacher in that moment is overwhelming. And it's astonishing how much pressure that is. So I think sometimes letting them behind the bubble and saying, sometimes this isn't going the way we want it to. Our entire topic for tomorrow's class in the Principles of College Teaching is, why is this hard during the pandemic? And what we're gonna do is we're gonna go and we're gonna chat about all the different things, all the skills that I've had to learn very, very quickly, all the reading I've done, all the issues I'm dealing with now that I haven't had to deal with before. I, like you, taught my first high flex class yesterday. I don't know if I liked it. And that's one of those things. Maybe I'll learn to like it. Maybe I'll get better at it. But it was weird. It was a very weird experience. And I think letting people know about these kind of things is going to be important in those classes that we both teach. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm hoping for both of us it's going to get better. So one of the questions that I brought up earlier, and Tucker just let me know that I didn't answer it well, about the students expect to be entertained, and there might be positives and negatives to that expectations. I think that everything we do in class should be relevant to the learning for the day. So I'm not a huge fan of having this tangent to this funny thing, but I am a fan if the funny thing helps my students learn. So I think one of the things we should do is let our students know that we are there to help them learn. Sometimes we can do something funny. Sometimes we do something entertaining. Sometimes we do something very, very serious. Sometimes we do something very work intensive. But letting our students know that what we're doing in this class is not just to make you laugh or smile, it's to make you learn the content better. And I think letting our students know that this is not edutainment is an important piece, especially when we're teaching people to teach. I remember someone telling me that they shoot cat videos throughout their class. I'm like, why do you show cat videos? She's like, just to make my students laugh. And I said, one of the issues with that is it makes your students think that they can't have fun learning the stuff they're supposed to learn. The fun is a break from the learning. It's actually teaching them that learning is boring. And I think we have to be very, very careful about those lessons that we provide to our students that are unintended. So hopefully I did a better job of that than I had done through the presentation organically with that issue.
Showing like a cat gif if like they're talking about like the anatomy of the cat. It's okay, right?
Delaney says, though, that if we're showing a cat GIF to show the anatomy of the cat, it might then be appropriate. And she's right. So this is good. So I'm going back to the comments we've got over here. One person said, I admitted to my students all the things I was forgetting to tell them the first day in class. And I didn't want to sound neurotic, but I want them to understand this is overwhelming for me too. I think that is completely a great thing to do. I don't think we should leave our students thinking that we're completely incompetent, right? So don't jeopardize the expertise. But I think letting them know we're authentic. I let my students know yesterday, I was like, I hate teaching in this mask. I'm going to do it because I believe in masks. I think we should wear them to prevent the spread of disease, but I don't like it. It's a necessary evil, and let's do this thing. So I think being honest with those kind of things is awesome. Delaney's a cat.
What?
Look, stand up. You have to look.
Kitty.
There we go. All right. We got to have those moments where we connect, right? And sometimes we can connect about our shared anxieties or our kittens. And it's a good thing we have very well-mannered kittens that are not going to chew us all up in doing this. I think clearly conveying we care about them, but when they submit work, they don't receive the grade they expected. Sometimes it creates a rift. Yes, this is a huge issue. We have a teaching apprenticeship program in psych sciences, which means that we kind of help students supervised in their first teaching experience, usually in a general psychology course with only about 20 students. The graduate students who teach this class are often similar in age to the students, and they have a lot of rapport. They almost seem like they're friends. And then sometimes those students feel betrayed by their friend when they don't do well in that first exam. And one of the things I think it's important to establish is what your role is. I think we can have a personal connection, but I think reminding our students of that professional connection and responsibility we have there too. And if throughout you've said, I'm here to help you learn, I'm here to help you succeed, and then you use the test as a learning check and say, okay, we have some data now. Maybe there's some questions we should have asked beforehand. Maybe there's some things that we could have provided beforehand. What are those things? What is the responsibility we can take to do better on the second exam? Because I want you to do better on the second exam. I think this is one way to reduce, but you're not going to completely eliminate that potential the person described as a risk. There are going to be some students who just feel betrayed because they think you gave them the exam rather than reported the score they earned. And I think this is something we can teach our students about. So people are talking about the distractions we have at home. I have a ton of distractions at home. You've seen some of my distractions at home. Get the bunny ears going right now. Do your best. And your best might not be another semester. When I say best, I don't mean optimal experience best. I mean, do what you can reasonably do. One of the things that I've done in my classes to the extent that I can is I've streamlined them. I've tried to create fewer points of contact in terms of assignment, but more points of contact in the investing in their success. What that means is I'm having more content to help them succeed, but I'm reading and grading fewer things. And the things that I'm reading and grading are more spread out in terms of how they happen in the semester, and they're more equitable in terms of the points. So I'm having fewer classes where I have huge numbers of points on this assignment and a lot of small ones. I'm trying to have fewer assignments that are more equal in being lower stakes, not necessarily low stakes, because this is going to be more easy for me. For those of you who have school-age kids, I have school-age kids, right? At best, if you've chosen the hybrid option for school in town, they'll be in school 2 days a week. That means 3 days a week, you're going to be facilitating their online learning experience, which means it's going to be real hard to get things done in those 3 days of the week. So I think being real kind and realistic to ourselves is going to be important. I will say that our university so far has been very, very good about putting out at least some guidance about relaxing standards for performance and teaching evaluations and things like that. We've been less specific about how to relax research productivity, but I believe that is coming. But I think we have to be kind to ourselves in structuring our courses. Structure something that you are able to handle. Real easy recommendation that I make, and I've made this recommendation for years, but I think now more important than ever, I recommend setting a maximum on your assignments, not a minimum. So if you're having your students write a paper, I would say max 2 pages, not minimum 2 pages. What will typically happen is you get the student's second draft because their first draft is going to go long. Because I typically think it's going to take them 4 pages, but I'm only going to give them 2. They write the 4-page paper, they cut it down to 2 pages, they give me a better product. That better products are easier to grade, number one, but 2 pages are faster to read than 4. So I highly recommend using maximums in the stuff that you do. If you're having an essay question, maximum 150 words rather than just letting them write or something like that. It's going to make your grading more manageable, and it's going to help your students learn to be brief and essential in their writing. So this is a real specific recommendation that I'm using for myself now. And seems like we've got some other good questions in there, other good comments, but we've run out of time. In fact, I've kept you a little bit long. One of the things I always try to do in my class is to get out on time, and I missed that. I'm sorry about that. If anyone wants to stay around for a second, I'm happy to do that. We will stop the recording at this point, so if anyone has any questions that they want to ask after. But thanks so much for attending our first leadoff event for the TLC Professional Development Series. We will be archiving these on Canvas, so you can check out asynchronously. Please do the post-event survey so you can get credit for attending this event. Hopefully you can earn a professional development certificate through us. And thank you so much for all you're doing for your students in a very, very challenging time. Thank you.